Right, I think it's probably about time I did a demo of where I'm at with Katapps at the moment. For the last few weeks, I've been working on creating environments which are basically just K3s clusters, which you can scale up and down easily through the web interface here. This week, I've been working on repository sync, which lets you clone repositories from services like GitHub, so we can use the contents of those repos when building applications or showing stuff in the web interface, seeing what commits there are, that sort of thing. So I took a break from Ruby for a couple of days. I built a API server in Go, which lets us clone repositories onto a dedicated storage host and then interrogate them over a nice API. So let's crack on with a quick demo of everything I've got so far. I've been spending a fair amount of time just polishing the UI and generally doing things like that. But what you probably see today, probably not what you're going to see in the future. There are lots of things I want to make simpler, but what I've got now is just a good point that lets me work on the back end and make sure things there are working really, really well. So let's start by looking at environments. So let's create our first environment here. I will call this demo environment. And we can choose a location here. At the moment, I've just got London as the options here, but we've got more on Katapps, so we can add them later. So as you can see here on the right-hand side there, it's provisioning all the parts of Katapps, so you get a load balancer, DNS zone, security group. And then on the left side, it's gone and created that first control plane server there called the Purple Llama. Now we're calling servers after a color and then an animal name, rather than just a random string. I think that's a bit more fun. You can see what it is there. It's a better name. You can talk about it with colleagues if you need to. If you've got to see where something's running or something like that, you can at least refer to it as being on the Purple Llama rather than being on A7394, whatever. So yeah, I've done that, made that a bit neater. So on this page, you can see there are two types of server. You've got a control plane server, and that's used to run components for the application. So that includes a small distributed database called ECCD, an API server, and a few other components within K3s as well. And the worker servers basically run your application, and they run the application bits only. There's not a huge amount of K3s extra components running there. And you can have as many of those as you want. If you want to scale and you want additional redundancy for the cluster itself, you can add more control planes, and they'll automatically synchronize data between them and make sure that you've got some redundancy there if there's anything goes wrong with them. And if you want more capacity or redundancy in your application itself, you can add more workers as well, and they can be whatever size you want on Katapps. So as you can see, the Purple Llama now is finished being created. If we click into here, we can see some details about it. And if we go down here, we can create our first worker server. So let's go on, let's choose a frog and add that. And the red dog goes off to be provisioned. In fact, let's add another one as well while we're at it. Let's do another bee, add that one. And that's going to go and create the blue badger. Oh, one more, why not? Another bee. And that will go and create those servers. Now it goes and creates it on Katapps. So the first thing it does is it goes and builds that virtual machine with the specification that you want. It adds it to the right groups and does the actual installation of K3s on the server as well, and then adds it into the cluster. So the Purple Llama is what's actually managing everything here. So it's managing those worker nodes. And if I was to deploy an application, they'd go onto those worker nodes, but there's no reason you need to actually have workers. Your application can run on control planes. If you just put in one server, build a big control plane, shove everything on there if it's just a small thing you want or just a staging environment or whatever. But you've got the capacity here now to scale up, scale down, do whatever you want. As you can see, these are all at various different stages. Upgrading the system, so we like to make sure they're upgraded, adding things to load balancer, and then actually installing K3s. So we'll just wait a few seconds for them to finish installing. They don't take very long, unfortunately. Okay, so we've got our 4-node cluster now, and at this point the environment is just a K3s cluster that we can now scale up and scale down. As you probably saw, we chose like versions of K3s, so if we wanted to upgrade this cluster, we could go up here, we could add another control plane and choose to install the next version in the series, and once we've installed one of those, we can delete the Purple Llama and then upgrade the workers. So you can just create new machines to do it. In the future, I'll probably build a tool that actually goes and does a rolling upgrade for you automatically, but for now it would be a manual process in there. But one thing at a time. So as I said, this is just a cluster. It's just running K3s. You can use this, but what you can actually do is connect to this using the Kubernetes command line. So let's have a little look at that. So if you haven't used it before, it's called kubectl, and you can use it to view the pods, run stuff, look at logs, all those things there. So if you click up here in the top right, you've got kubectl, and I've created this quick page here that just gives some docs on how to install this. It actually looks a bit rubbish because these don't go to the edge anymore, but that doesn't matter. Fix that later. And this gives you an example kube config file, and we use OpenID Connect to facilitate the login here. So you don't have to worry about sharing keys. It's all going to be managed by the same login you use to actually log into Katapps itself. So if we copy that config file, and we'll just put that in a file called kubeconfig.yaml, paste that in there, and then we're going to run kubectl --kubeconfig, give it the path that file, and then we're going to run get nodes. And what you'll see here is it opens up the browser briefly there, and it didn't ask me to log in because it already had a session, but it went to the browser to exchange the token. If I wasn't logged in, it would have asked me to log in. And what you can see here is the details of the node. So we've got our blue badger, purple llama, red dog. If we want to go and see all the pods that are running on the cluster, we can do that. We can see what's running. If we want to go and look at the logs for this traffic, we could just go, we could go here, we do logs, and have a look at that. And that just says, okay, configuration, not a lot to see in that log file, but you can do all of those things. And you basically, if you've got a Kubernetes application, or you want to deploy stuff, you could go mad now. You've got this here, and that's really quite cool. I like that. I like that a lot. I think we're going to use that quite a lot internally. The orchestration of this is probably where the most useful thing is. Like, it's not particularly complicated, but it is there, and it does make, it makes your life a bit easier. What's going to be quite exciting is Bill, who's one of our Go engineers at Crystal, is now working on a CSI driver to allow Katapult block storage to be used on these clusters as well, which means if you want to put a database service on here, it can create a disk on Katapult, which is fast, reliable, redundant, and backed up storage, and mount that properly into your containers for you, which means you've got reliable storage. And that's one of the things I've always struggled with Kubernetes in our environment, is that they might be backed by NFS or something like that, whereas this storage will be fast as a normal disk on your host. It's reliable and redundant, so if that machine fails, that disk can be mounted somewhere else straight away for you to use on that. So perfect for databases in this context. So Bill's working on that, looking forward to seeing what he comes up with and getting that deployed onto these K3s clusters automatically whenever they're created. So let's look at the repositories side of things. The concept with the repository is fairly simple. We need to be able to clone Git repos so we can look through the files, determine how best to build the application, sort of see, is it a Rails app, is it a PHP app, is it JavaScript, whatever, and then we can make suggestions about how it needs to be built. And that is what this is about. It's about getting a copy of that repository locally. Rather than just rely on the APIs on the repo hosting services, we want a local API and a local copy of that repository. I don't want to just be making API calls to GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or whoever. They've all got different APIs. I don't want to maintain that. And secondly, if you don't have one of those services and you still want to use this, you might not have an API, and we need the actual repo. So we will create, or I've spent some time last week, as I said earlier, building this server in Go. It allows us to have a consistent API, and we can scale up those repo backends as needed in the future. So right now I've just integrated the web UI and everything with GitHub, which allows anyone to add repositories that are on GitHub to their Katapps account. This uses the GitHub Apps API, and that handles the authentication and makes it really easy to work with. Let's take a look at that quickly. So if you go here, you can go add a repository, you choose where it's hosted. Now go to GitHub, you choose which GitHub account it's in, and then you can select from your repo. So if I add Katapps itself, it goes off here, adds it, clones it, and it's ready to go. So if I click here, you can click through, see the latest commit and whatever you've got there. And that's all I've got really on repos. It's really simple on the front end. There's not a lot to see, but we do have that whole back-end Git server, Go service running there as well. And that's really it for today, folks. I don't think that's bad progress really for less than 4 weeks for one person working on it. In the next video, I want to jump back in, have a look at some of the specifics about the Rails application under this, having a look at the dependencies, choice of database, and other things like that. If you could click that like and subscribe, really useful, helps me actually motivate me to make some more of these videos. And yeah, on that note, I'm going to start thinking about getting these repos turned into containers. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.